Jill, that was wonderful. And we'll end up repeating some of the things that you said, but I think it's because it's coming from providers and it's coming from people in the field. Your memory is also wonderful because I'm going to read my speech here. So my gist is that there's a perfect storm coming and it's heading towards our youngest. I am an early childhood educator. My undergraduate degree is in psychology with a concentration in developmental psychology. My graduate degree is in early childhood education. It is my profession and it is my passion. My first taste of that profession and passion came in the summer before I entered the 5th grade, I'm not telling you what year, in a small, very small town in Maine. For some reason, Mrs. Box, the beloved kindergarten teacher, asked me to be her assistant for the summer. While I had not been in Mrs. Box's class or had Mrs. Box for a teacher, she had survived a year with my younger brother, so that might have been some degree of empathy involved there. Now, note, I loved my brother, but he also began my love for bright, challenging, misbehaving boys. Mrs. Box invited several children from struggling families to her trailer home Monday through Friday in the mornings for 10 weeks in the summer. She read to them, colored with them, taught them songs and counting games, took them on nature walks every day, and talked with them. Most of all, she observed them and would share those observations with me as we cleaned up. Did you notice how Freeland recognized the shades of color were different in that patch of lilies, and that he used the word shade? Or Jenny asked a question today. That's after 2 weeks of silence from Jenny. Or Betty Ann stood her ground when he tried to take that crayon away. Mrs. Box was a brilliant teacher and an amazingly compassionate human being who also fed every child every day with her funds, everything was free, with a bologna, cheese, mayonnaise sandwich on white bread and a glass of Kool-Aid. Nutrition was not her strength, but she had a teacher's intellect and a heart and knew when and which child to send home with those extra sandwiches. And I observed as those children softened, started to smile and talk and laugh and learn. The difference in those children from day one to the last tearful day of box camp was unmistakable, and I learned 2 very important aspects of teaching: the powers of skillful observation and the even more magnificent powers of respect. For she talked with, listened to, and observed each and every child with somber, thoughtful respect. I was smitten. And I have never sat in another classroom since at any level without gauging the respect of a teacher's interactions. I find young children's development fascinating and never tire of watching, listening, and observing them in action. Early childhood education is not for the weak. It's exhausting and exhilarating, all-encompassing, commands your complete attention, as well as a strong immune system. There is no clearly defined content area. It may change every day and within every day. It requires a broad and solid knowledge base of the developmental aspects of cognition, language, social emotional skills, physical and motor development, and then demands that you are able to translate and defend that development as building a strong and solid foundation that is often not clearly measurable or measurable in clearly delineated terms, but must not be viewed as a race. Years ago, psychologist David Elkind explained that early childhood learning at its best allows time for horizontal learning, time for young children to play, interact, and practice and hone those skills that they have learned before jumping on to the next level, building a strong, solid, broad foundation rather than a narrow and perhaps wavering tower. At various times in my career, I've been a bit quiet and reserved in discussing my profession. No longer. That's true, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. For many years, while we in the field understood the impact and potential of quality education for little ones, more often than not, the general public viewed us as nice ladies who played well with children. Perhaps because the field is overwhelmingly female as well as devastatingly unpaid. And which of those came first, folks? But when brain science emerged with its research and proved what we had known and practiced, that young children are quite capable of understanding concepts and learning vast amounts in the first few years of life, many of us had this encouraging hallelujah moment. We would have our platforms for advocating the importance of pre-literacy, pre-numeracy, and the whole child approach. We would perhaps be heard when explaining that children think and learn differently. They think differently, not deficiently. And quality early childhood education understands that thinking, knows how to create environments and learning situations that enhance learning and appropriately and constructively challenge the youngest minds. Quality early childhood education is not drill and practice. It is not online pre-K, folks. It is teaching practices such as Montessori and Reggio Emilia and other developmentally appropriate practices that are multisensory and backed by theory and research that understand and respect young children, how they learn, and learn most effectively, most genuinely, most authentically. It is not online pre-K. So those plans for advocacy weren't as successful as I had wished they would be, and I often want to apologize on behalf of my entire generation, but I think there's also a myriad of reasons for that failure. ECE, early childhood ed, is still a relatively new science. While Piaget and other giants of developmental theory started building the practice in the middle of the last century, the importance of early childhood only took traction with proof, the brain science and later longitudinal studies. We know that young children, infants even, are learning from the moment they emerge. We've proven that. And we know that quality early learning impacts people throughout their lives, often returning as much as $13 for every dollar spent. We know it. We need to inform and advocate. Exactly what you said, Jill. Also, the measurable outcomes of ECU often come later. Third grade reading level, behavior in kindergarten, graduation from high school, and all of that comes from longitudinal studies. Those are difficult time frames to use when advocating for funding. Quality early education is expensive. It has the highest overhead of a child's education, the quantity of consumable goods, the lowest teacher-student ratio, and constant updates on environments and equipment as children develop at a rapid rate. And finally, K through 12 education is firmly in place, but often under-subsidized itself. So the thought of diverting or dividing or significantly increasing public funding to support early childhood education is a painful and daunting sell. So we have this history of a female-dominated workforce that has been grossly underpaid, and as studies and research continue to show the important impact of quality early learning, the cash flow situation becomes more dire than ever. I know what early learning with the right resources look like, and it's expensive. Yet this stage of children's schooling consistently receives the least funding. The storm is coming. Not enough qualified teachers and not enough centers that can afford to maintain high-quality learning. And it will impact our state, our workforce, our economy, to say nothing about our children's future. It's been well documented that teachers with degrees are the most important aspect of quality in early education, yet few centers can afford to pay competitive and fair salaries. We not only need to find degreed teachers, but then we need to be paying them fair market rates. As Jill pointed out, presently a teacher with a degree in early childhood education will begin the profession with a minimum of $12,000 less a year than a teacher entering the elementary school system. The workforce is suffering incredibly, not just the present, but we're creating a situation where there will be no future workforce. The pipeline of teachers who are willing to hold on to their passion and sacrifice their personal viability is understandably becoming smaller. We should all be alarmed. Not only are our children's experiences compromised, but what will happen to our economy if there are not enough teachers to staff centers? As a veteran in this profession, I will tell you undeniably that ECE is at a very serious juncture. If we do not create a better revenue stream for quality early education and care, what we will be creating is an elitist system of privately funded quality centers that are out of the reach of even middle-class families. Do we really care about equity? And if so, why not close the gap before it widens? Current rates at the state voucher system, while recently increased, are still at 50% of the market rate, typically covering less than 2/3 of the actual cost. The research and numbers are sound. So where is the logic in repairing the damage as opposed to building stronger foundations that offer hope, resilience, and skills needed for successful lives? However, we as a nation, and certainly Delaware as a state, continue to drag our feet on investing in future generations, even though successful pathways are mapped out for us. There are many states that do it better. There are studies suggesting pathways that have succeeded. Universal pre-K in Delaware would be a solid first step for all children and families. Respectfully, we're not asking for you all to invent the wheel, just stop spinning them. I moved out of New England 3 years ago to take the position at St. Michael's, which will be celebrating 130 years next year of serving the youngest and often least served children of Wilmington. Its mission resonated to me the minute I walked through their doors, much as Mrs. Box's work did. 130 years. So will we be part of that generation that extinguishes that mission? I would like to close with the words of Lillian Katz, who's a giant in early childhood ed, one of my heroes, along with Mrs. Box. And this is what she says. Each of us must come to care about everyone else's children. We must recognize that the well-being of our own children is intimately linked to the well-being of all other people's children. After all, when one of our children needs life-saving surgery, someone else's children will perform it. When one of our children is harmed by violence, someone else's child will have committed it. The good life for our own children can be secured only if it is secured for all children. But to work for the well-being of all children is not just a practical matter, it is also right. Thank you.